Okay, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are. My name's Kevin May. I'm the editor and co-founder of Tnooz.com. So, welcome to unusually the first of two webinars this week. And what we've kindly decided to do for all of you is separate them out into regions, depending on where you are. So what we're hoping is that most of you that are listening in right now are in the Asia Pacific region, because this one is specifically targeted at you. So this webinar here today is supported by eNett, so thank you very much. And we're also joined by MasterCard, beg your pardon, Worldwide. So the idea around this, how travel payments are transforming the industry, is essentially this. So what's actually happened, we found over the last few years, is that the payments landscape is complicated, it's complex, and it's often difficult to actually work out how it is evolving and what you should do as industry players to kind of rise to the top of this trend of virtual payments, how things are changing, how to work with partners, what your partners should be doing to ensure safety and things like this. We're seeing rapid changes in points of sale. The distribution changes. The distribution chains are evolving in many respects across the industry, but in particular with here as well. And these some legacy payment systems are now competing with some frighteningly new and very complex payment innovations as well. So we thought it was about time that someone kind of clarified the options and indeed the cost for all of this, which is why we're producing this webinar this morning my time with eNett. I believe it's the afternoon for many of you, and it's indeed the middle of the night for some of our presenters here today. So next slide please, Jean. As I said, my name's Kevin May. I'm the editor and your moderator here today. In the background is Quinn, who's the CEO of Tnooz and our producer. And I'm delighted to say that we've got two top experts joining us today. Next slide, please, Jean. And they are, next slide, please, Jean. Jason Hancock, who's the head of channel development at eNett International. He has recently joined in the last year or so from Travelport. Travelport, obviously, eNett is a joint venture which involves Travelport, the large technology company in the industry that everybody knows. And he's joined today by Luis Yofe. He's the senior business leader for travel payments at MasterCard Worldwide. So as you can see, two experts here that we've got to talk about some of the issues and then to join us at the end of the session for a Q&A. So next slide, please. As always, we have interspersed the entire show today with various polls. We see these as kind of litmus tests to see where the audience are in terms of this particular subject and indeed about travel payments today. So you'll see a series of these polls pop up during the course of certainly the first part when Jason is talking. So just follow my lead and follow the instructions on the screen. Just a reminder that we are recording this entire webinar today. We will be recording the second one this week, which is targeted at Europe, Middle East, and Africa, and America as well. And we will put both of these recordings onto Tnooz within probably by the end of the week once we've got both of them formatted. And also, you also have the opportunity to ask questions for the Q&A at the end. So you do that very easily by going to the question section on the right-hand side of your dashboard that you are looking at right now. So we'll get to a Q&A at the end. So please fire your questions in. We know it's a very complex subject matter, but like we said, we have two experts here to help you. So let's do this first poll then. Let's find out what you're all thinking. So how confident are you of being able to select the most appropriate payment solution for your business? Three very simple answers there, hopefully. Extremely confident, somewhat confident, or quite doubtful. And you've got about 20 seconds to cast your votes. So extremely, somewhat, or quite. And let's put those results up now, I think, Jean. So 54% of you, just over half, say you're somewhat confident. Just under a third say you're quite doubtful. Only 16% of you say you're extremely confident. So lots to learn, I suspect, as a result of seeing what the audience thinks on this particular subject. So I'm now going to hand over to Jason Hancock. As I said, he works at eNett. He today is actually in Dubai. He's attending the Arabian Travel Market show, which takes place in Dubai, the sister the sister exhibition of the world travel market that takes place in where I am in London. But good morning. I think it's just about good morning still for you, Jason. I hope you're well, and I'm going to hand over to you, and the floor is yours, sir.
Thanks, Kevin, and hello, everyone. Jean, if you could move to the next slide, please. So we're going to take the next 30 or 40 minutes to look at some of the key insights and emerging trends coming out of a recent Focusrite in-depth study into the global travel payments marketplace, a research program that's been carried out by Focusrite and sponsored both by eNett and MasterCard. So firstly, by way of agenda, I'll step through some of the research methodology that was used very quickly, and then highlight some of the emerging trends coming out of the study. And since eNett is one of the major providers of virtual card solutions in the travel industry today, we'll take a specific viewpoint in how virtual card technologies are helping travel companies to solve some of the key challenges highlighted in the research and present the challenges presented by those emerging trends. I'll then hand over to Luis Yofe from MasterCard, who will talk about the true cost of payments and why it's so important to take a wider perspective on this. And finally, we'll close with a summary and questions. Next slide, please. So let's start by giving a brief overview of the research. A special project by Focusrite entitled Payments Unsettled, Cost, Opportunity and Disruption in the Travel's Complex Payment Landscape. And in summary, the study helps the reader to understand the complex travel payments environment, takes a look at some of the key emerging trends and the main challenges with payments faced by both travel retailers and suppliers today. For eNett, our motivation for sponsoring this research is really threefold. Firstly, so we can better understand the pain points agencies and suppliers have when making their B2B payments, to better understand the perception around payment costs and how these differ, both by region and by type of organisation, and to get the industry viewpoint on the usage and the relative merits of virtual card solutions. So this was a qualitative study conducted over 3 months starting November 2012 and surveyed more than 1,500 people in the travel industry. The chart on the slide you're seeing now shows the two major approaches taken to segmentation. The left-hand pie breaks down the field by industry segment into retailers in the blue, which include travel agencies, travel management companies, and OTAs. Suppliers in the red, which include airlines, including low-cost carriers, hotels, other lodging suppliers, and a number of other small suppliers as well. Wholesalers and tour operators in the purple, and travel technology and payment systems providers in the green. The right-hand pie is a breakdown of survey respondents geographically and shows balanced representation of the survey across all major regions. Next slide, please, Jean. Furthermore, we see across each of the industry segments shown here, retailer, wholesaler, and supplier, there's a broad representation in respondent size as measured by gross sales in US dollars per annum. Reading this chart from left to right and taking the blue and red bars together, you'll see that, in fact, over half the respondents in the survey were relatively small, with less than 5 million US dollars gross travel bookings a year. Next slide, please, Jean. And finally, we take a quick look at the mix of respondents by job function, strongly represented in the blue by sales and marketing and business development, and in the red, operations and administrative functions, with 11% of respondents from a finance, accounting, or procurement background, shown with the purple. And the smaller retailers in the study we just mentioned are most likely to have cross-functional responsibilities shown by the green in the pie chart. Next slide, please, Jean. So now we get to the more interesting bit and take a look into some of the emerging trends in travel payments that have come out of this piece of research. Next slide, please. That's it. So just before we do, it's important for us to take stock of the current travel payments landscape, which, as Kevin mentioned right at the start, remains highly complex and fragmented. The chart on the slide for all survey respondents shows which methods used for both consumer to business, C2B, and business to business, or B2B, are currently supported in their business, not supported but plan to be, not supported and don't plan to be, or don't know. And if you focus your attention firstly on the top half of the chart, so above the green line that cuts about five bars down, it's perhaps unsurprising to note that the more traditional payment methods of cash, check, cards, and electronic funds transfer continue to dominate the payment landscape in travel. Credit cards and cash being most prevalent, with over 85% of travel companies currently supporting them. Digging a little deeper, and again, perhaps unsurprisingly, we see that for some of the regions, the mix of payments can vary significantly. Specifically in Middle East and Africa and Eastern Europe, where cash and electronic funds transfer plays a much bigger role. Now turning your attention to the bottom half of the chart, so below the green line, in general we observe that emerging or alternative payment methods such as virtual cards, prepaid solutions and mobile payments have pretty limited awareness and uptake. However, we observe that virtual cards are making some headway, with almost 40% of travel businesses either supporting their use or planning to do so in the near future. Whereas mobile payments are hotly tipped or hot topic, we noticed that respondents supporting mobile payments is barely measurable. In fact, in the survey results, it's interesting to note that travel retailers cite supporting new mobile payment methods as the fourth most important in the list of major challenges with regards to managing their payments. So it's definitely on people's mind, just not quite there yet. Next slide, please, Jim. So with the landscape now set from the research, we've identified the following 6 emerging trends affecting payments in the travel industry. The continuing dominance of credit cards and how this will evolve, a shift towards payment at time of booking, an increase in supplier direct relationships, the need for increased payment automation in travel booking systems, the challenges faced by travel companies when operating in a increasingly globalized market, specifically around managing FX and cross-border payments, and the rise of mobile. So in the next section, I'm going to just spend a little bit of time going through each of the first 5 trends. We'll leave the topic of mobile payments outside of this webinar for now, and put this all into context of virtual card offerings and how they help solve some of the challenges. So first, to tee it up, let's have a polling question. So Kevin, back over to you.
Okay, so same as before. So look at the multiple choice answers that you have on the screen, and let's have the second poll, please, Jim. So how would you rate your virtual card knowledge now? Please be honest here. So is it 1, extremely knowledgeable, 2, somewhat knowledgeable, or 3, I'm a complete virtual card novice? And I see many of you are already voting. And I suspect the answer is going to be quite good news in some respects for eNett. So 48% of you, just under half, say you're virtual card novices. Maybe that's why you're listening in today. 43% of you say you're somewhat knowledgeable, and indeed we hope you're learning more today. So, and I think that's just 9%, single digits there, say you're extremely knowledgeable, which I suspect, Jason, don't know if you agree with me, shows the is that more around just that it's not a subject that people are either interested in or they haven't looked into? I mean, why do you think that perhaps the extremely knowledgeable percentage point is relatively low there, first of all, before we dive back into your presentation?
I guess it's relatively new technology being applied to specifically the business to business or the agency to supplier channel. So it might be a case of education and the fact that a lot of the agencies, remember we when we did the survey, that there were a lot of smaller respondents to the survey. Perhaps the audience is similar today, people dialing in from backgrounds of smaller agencies. It's typically the larger agencies who are very familiar with these technologies and adopting virtual card technologies first.
Okay, right.
We expect
okay,
that to work.
Sure, we may well get some more questions on that at the end, but I'm going to hand back over to you, and if you could just put the slides, Jason's slides back up there, Jean, that'd be great. Thank you. Back over to you, Jason.
Thanks, Kevin. So I guess for half the audience who are virtual card novices, to very quickly explain in brief the principles around the virtual card. It's sometimes called a ghost card, or in eNett's case, a virtual account number, or VAN, and it's an electronically generated, typically single-time use credit card number, which comes complete with expiry date and 3-digit security code. One of the beauties of virtual cards is you can set a number of parameters against each of these virtual card numbers to control how it can be used. So, for example, the maximum amount the virtual card number can be authorized for by a supplier, the activation date on the virtual card number, the type of merchant that can actually use that virtual card, and so on and so forth. And really, virtual cards are no different than normal credit cards from what the supplier sees on the supplier side. So, and certainly in eNett's case, the virtual card that's generated by the agency for payment to the supplier, to them is just like any other MasterCard. Okay, so let's get on with the trends. So, Jean, next slide, please. Trend 1, credit cards reign supreme. So here we have, apologies to the audience, which is mainly APAC based. This is a bit of a US-centric slide. On the left-hand side, we show the share of US airline passenger revenue from sales directly through the airline's website by payment method, and where 88% of those payments made were by credit card. If we take a global viewpoint on this statistic, then the number drops down to 68%. So from 88% in the US to 68% globally. That's diluted mainly by local electronic funds transfer solutions in Western Europe and APAC, as well as the importance that we saw before of cash and check in Middle East and Africa and Eastern Europe. On the right-hand side, we see a similar picture for airline sales made by travel intermediaries and settled through ARC, with 90% of payments made on the corporate or the traveler's own credit card, with the remaining 10% made via cash invoice. Interestingly, across the rest of the world, and this is typical in the APAC region as well, for payments by agencies to airlines, the picture here is completely reversed. Of the 250 billion of gross, 250 billion US dollars of gross sales reported in 2012 by IATA BSP, 175 billion, or that's 70%, was settled by payment on invoice. So next slide, please, Jean. And it's a similar picture for hotels, or at least through their direct channels. Globally, 68% of bookings made on hotel websites and 87% of bookings made through other direct channels were made using credit cards. So credit cards, without a doubt, are the #1 payment method worldwide. However, not without their challenges, and that's where virtual cards come in. As an extension to the standard credit card model, they provide solutions to some of the challenges faced around payment processing inefficiencies, data reporting and reconciliation, multi-currency support, internal fraud and supplier misuse, PCI compliance, and so on. Next slide, please, Jean. So the traditional method for payment to hotels globally has been for the guest to pay at time of checkout. Trend 2 challenges this model in predicting a shift towards supplier prepayment. Somewhere between a quarter and a third of hoteliers responding to the survey expected prepayment methods to grow a lot, with a further 40% expecting them to grow a little in the near future. For hotels selling direct, as many as 74%, shown on the chart on the left of the slide, are already offering prepaid booking options on their websites. We see approximately 1/5 of all website bookings made are on prepaid rates. In the world of air, a meaningful minority of travel agency bookings are now conducted with the airline direct, a change which has been driven predominantly by the rise of low-cost carriers, but also airlines choosing not to participate in the BSP. In both scenarios, credit cards is already the predominant form of payment, as we've just seen. However, significant value can be derived from travel retailers opting for newer virtual card payment methods to solve some of the challenges associated with prepayment, and specifically in the agency channel, principally around data reporting and reconciliation, but also providing a prepayment method that can be rolled out securely across a whole organization. Next slide, please, Jean. The next trend looks at increase in supplier direct relationships. Today, up to 40% of global airline bookings are conducted directly with airlines rather than through travel intermediaries. These direct sales are on the rise, and sales on airlines' websites have been increasing by 2% year on year since 2010. At the same time, more than half of hotels book direct. That's 27% through hotel websites and 26% through offline channels. And for bookings made by travel intermediaries, middlemen such as consolidators are demanding increases in higher commissions to provide services and assisting supplier distribution. This has mainly come about by a significant reduction in IATA membership numbers, creating a premium for ticketing services. So, to increase margins where possible, agencies are therefore looking at ways to cut out these so-called middlemen by building direct supplier relationships and vice versa, with suppliers looking to forge direct relationships with agencies to reduce their cost of sale. Often, one thing holding them back from doing this is finding an appropriate settlement solution, somewhere that virtual card solutions can help by facilitating immediate and guaranteed payment from the agency to the supplier, providing a solution that doesn't require significant technology investment to implement, because ultimately it's just a MasterCard. Provide a solution which provides controls that help reduce fraud and misuse, and multi-currency capabilities enabling broader distribution. Next slide, please, Jean. So trend 4 is the desire for increased payment automation. So in the research, we asked the question, which of the following criteria for virtual cards are most important for your organization when considering a virtual card provider? And the response came back, is shown by the chart on your screen. The top reason was reduced risk of fraud and protection against supplier default. You see on the slide the yellow call-out box. For larger suppliers, typically access to multiple currencies and improved expense reconciliation were both pretty important factors. However, two things really surprised us about this data given our own experience. The first was how high up the list automatic GDS integration came, second place with 33% of respondents. And the second was how low down the list rebates came. In fact, it came last at only 6% of respondents. So we thought we'd test this out with the audience, which leads us nicely into the next polling question. So over to you, Kevin.
Okay, thanks, Jason. So your third poll today is as follows, please, June. Which of the following reasons is the most important for moving to a virtual card? Choose just one, please. So reduced risk of fraud and supplier default, automated GDS integration, data and reporting, rebates, and does not actually apply to my business. So we'll give you a little bit more time to answer this one because there's additional answers. As I'm watching those results coming in, we do have an overwhelming winner, if winner is the right word here, but we'll let it run through a little bit longer. Okay. Right, let's throw up those results now, I think, Jean, please. So 59% of you say it is reduced risk of fraud and supplier default. 1 in 5, the automated GDS integration, and you can see the remainder of the results there. Just 4% of you say it doesn't apply to the business. So obviously they are thinking about it, which is good. So okay, and as you said, Jason, this leads us on to the next part of your presentation. So fire away, sir.
Yeah, so good news. That reflected what we saw in the Focusrite research, and the fact that rebates is so far down the list in terms of importance. So from the survey, 40% of agencies believe that virtual cards can increase efficiency in their business through GDS integration, and it's typically the travel management companies, the TMCs, who are especially interested in the process efficiencies, the enhanced data capture and reporting, the reconciliation benefits to be gained from tighter integration of virtual cards into the agency's primary selling platform, the GDS. And this is something that eNett's been focusing on quite a lot. In fact, we've recently released a new GDS app for Travelport's Galileo desktop and SmartPoint points of sale, which effectively enables the booking agent to quickly create an eNett VAN or eNett virtual account number within the agent's standard workflow. And this slide just briefly describes how it works, and I'll step through it. So the agent makes a low-cost carrier booking, a hotel booking, or an air booking as usual. Then they either click on the eNett icon or type #VAN for virtual account number into the terminal window or the SmartPoint command line. Booking data is then automatically captured from the PNR, passed over to the eNett payments platform, and a request for a virtual card number made. The agent checks all the details around the virtual card are correct, enters their password, and clicks submit, at which point the VAN payment details are then automatically written back into the PNR. So pretty simple. More to come. We're increasingly working on solutions for tighter integration with the GDS, so more to come on this. Okay, so one last slide. Next slide, please, Jean. One last trend, and I need to speed up. So this is the last one we'll consider, and it considers how travel companies are managing their cross-border payments. It's a complicated slide. Larger travel agencies and travel retailers are more likely to operate multiple currency accounts and multiple currencies and maintain multiple foreign currency accounts, bank accounts, in order to do this. Especially, and you see in the top 3 bars of the chart, in the wholesaler sector of the industry. The cost of running multinational and multi-currency accounting operations means that even these large companies have potential efficiency gains to be made by migrating to a single global payments platform. But the pain is most often felt by the small to medium-sized travel companies, which often lack the infrastructure, resources, and skill sets required to effectively manage foreign exchange transactions. So this is another area in which multi-currency virtual card platforms have a really important part to play in simplifying the process for smaller agencies and effectively reducing the cost. Okay, next slide, please. And back to you, Kevin.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you very much, Jason, there for in Dubai for us today. So, time is of the essence, and unfortunately, because we did start a few minutes later, I'm going to hand over straight away to Luis Yofe. He is, as I said earlier, the Senior Business Leader at MasterCard Worldwide for the Travel Payment Solutions end of the business. He's actually in Connecticut in the US, on the east coast of the US today, so it's be gentle with him, everybody, because it is in the very wee small hours of the morning. So welcome to you, Luis. I'm glad you can join us, and I'm going to hand over to you now, sir.
Thank you, Kevin. And I want to go straight into the next slide. And normally when people talk about the cost of moving to a credit card transaction, they're looking at the actual cost of the merchant fees or the airline surcharges without considering the whole cost of manually processing, reconciling, and reporting on invoices, or being able to track commissions, multiple platforms, and of course not mention the foreign exchange cost and the delayed cash flow, the potential cost of fraud. And it was interesting to see how high in the interest is the protection against default of the suppliers. Very, very interesting result. On the next slide, you can see some interesting, again, it's a very busy slide, but a lot of interesting information about our survey, where we have some airlines reporting that they are charging a surcharge for a range of payments in the booking methods. More traditional agencies, more than half of them are reporting that they are adding a surcharge represented by a different type of service fee, where fewer online travel agencies are charging additional fees, but then take into account the efficiencies of an OTA in the processing of the whole transaction. Obviously, they have a much lower overhead with the automation of the whole process. But the important message here is, despite the surcharges for credit cards, our research at MasterCard shows that on the average, utilizing a credit card as a payment is 37% cheaper than the alternative payment methods when you take into account all the different components of accounts receivables, wire transfer costs, the delay in settlement, and the manpower that you need to manage other form of payments. And the next slide. The second component is the reconciliation of the invoices. And auditing and manually issuing checks or wire transfers is a very resource-intensive and time-consuming process that has a cost. So based on the results of our joint research conducted under the sponsorship of eNett and MasterCard, depending on the size of the account or the travel organization, is how many people on the average we think is required, and the cost associated with it to manage a form of payment other than a credit card. So the interesting thing about credit cards, and it was mentioned several times by Jason, that it really a virtual account number is an account number that works just like a physical card number. So it runs through the rails and the infrastructure that exists today in the industry. And although there's been some confusion on part of some of the hotels, in particular, how to handle this, there's really no mystery to it. It's an account number, and just the fact that physically there was no plastic issue, it doesn't change the way of processing the transaction. The next slide. And again, the fraud prevention and some interesting numbers as a result of the survey. For example, heavy online sellers, 46% of the online travel agencies are concerned about the fraud, and obviously because all their transactions are online, card not present, and the concerns about accepting form of payments other than credit cards, where we have a very clear authorization process worldwide to assure the validity of the cards. Like we mentioned also, there are particular controls, additional controls that can be placed on virtual cards when they are issued. The virtual account numbers will have additional restrictions to minimize or eliminate the risk of those cards to be used for non-intended purposes. The next slide is a very sore subject for many travel management companies, and is the inability to collect 100% of all the commissions due to them. So we believe by the deployment of virtual account numbers, enable travel agents to pay the net amount when prepaying a hotel, becoming a win-win situation because the money gets to the hotelier faster. They don't have to worry about keeping track of commissions coming to them or the hotels having to send commissions. In many cases, when they are cross-border transactions, the cost of depositing a check coming in from a hotel in another currency is higher than the actual value of the commission that was sent to the travel agency, as an example. And the next slide, it talks about the delay or the concerns about the length of time between the payment and the invoicing. Hotels that offer a line of credit to travel agencies to be able to hold reservations and bill back the travel agency so they can bill back the corporate clients, on the average are taking a 30% payment, a 30-day payment term. Airlines get paid in about 17 days after the agency has settled with IATA when the transactions are not on a credit card. And it's clear by smaller organizations that cannot handle the cash flow are concerned about the lag time between the invoicing and making the payments to the suppliers. So moving a corporate client for a TMC from invoicing for air or for hotels to a credit card environment and utilizing individual virtual account numbers for each transaction not only eliminate the challenge of cash flow that in many cases they cannot handle, and streamlines the process of reconciliation, allocation of cost, and a very interesting subject of being able to handle refunds, partial or full refunds, when in many cases, because of the lack of details attached to a credit, to an account, due to the capabilities or lack of capabilities of some of the credit card processors in many parts of the world, if you use a central account number versus a single-use virtual account numbers, it's very difficult to reconcile those credits with the original transaction to understand exactly who this credit belonged to. By utilizing single account numbers, those credits, partial or full refunds into the account, will be processed against the individual single-use virtual account number, allowing 100% match of every single partial or full refund that may happen after the fact in any of these purchase types. So in summary, and I know it's a lot of information to digest, but I think it's very valuable information to understand the tremendous potential that we have today with the existing technology. The travel payment landscape in the industry is very complex, it's fragmented, and it's probably going to get a little bit more complicated. And the research indicates that there is a shift by the fact that technology today allows us to have a more direct relationship with the suppliers. Clearly, a tendency of multinational companies to globalize their travel programs, and the ability to provide multi-currency settlements electronically cross borders allows multinational companies and TMCs alike to globalize and standardize the customer experience, and an increase in automation with integration with the existing workflow at the point of sale. So eNett has done a phenomenal job integrating to the desktop of the travel agent to minimize the time to process a reservation, and just with simple couple of keystrokes, allowing the agent not to interrupt the workflow that is so important today when TMCs and corporates alike are reducing or trying to reduce the cost of processing reservations. And the travel industry should take a wider view considering the overall cost. So it's not just thinking about the surcharge of utilizing credit cards or the merchant fee discounts associated with the payment. We need to take a look at the whole cost of processing transactions when we do not have an electronic payment solution. So I hope that this is a good overview. It's a very long presentation. There's a lot of information to digest, but I think we're going to have some Q&As. So back to Kevin.
Okay, we certainly are, Luis. Thank you very much, and I hope you've got enough coffee there to get you through another 10 minutes before you need to go to sleep. Jean Quinn, who is our glamorous producer as always, is also in Connecticut and also is refueling on coffee, I suspect, as we sleep. So as we speak. So right, we've got a couple of questions have come in, guys. Jason and Luis, if you can prepare yourselves for those, and this is the part where Jean usually joins us as well. So some of them are quite practical, which I guess it really does illustrate that people are still trying to get their heads around this. So we'll go through a couple of those, and then Jean and I have got some questions as well. And this may be one where you just have to clarify what's some of the processes here. So this is a question from Rena. Thank you very much. You've actually sent in a couple, but this is one that we particularly want you to kind of come back on, guys. So Rena says, how does a virtual card, and if you could just summarize again, protect a travel agency against fraud or chargeback for payment models worldwide? I guess this is one for you, Jason, maybe.
Sure, yeah. So if you take the scenario of a travel agency making bookings or standard bookings with an airline and settling that through invoice. Depending on the region you are, the settlement time frame might be a week, a couple of weeks, or a month. Now, imagine the scenario where you've collected, as an agency, you've collected full payment from your customer for purchase of those travel tickets, and you've paid out to the airline for purchase of those same travel tickets. So the agency in this equation is taking responsibility for that payment. Then the worst happens, and the airline that is supposed to be providing that product, so those flights, goes bust. For agencies, there's an exposure there that they have a responsibility to the customer to provide those flights. They've already paid the airline for those flights, but the airline's gone bust. The situation there is that the agency is standing in line to try and get their money back. If instead of paying on invoice, the agency paid for those flights on a virtual card, or in fact any credit card, they can in fact issue a chargeback for that flight or those sets of flights, which in our case eNett will process on the agency's behalf to get their money back through either the airline, and if the airline is not able to pay, then through the airline's acquiring bank, and ultimately if the acquiring bank falls over, then through the MasterCard scheme.
Yeah,
so
just going to add something. This is Luis, and to summarize that, from the credit card perspective, there are rules related to service not rendered by a provider or by a supplier, by a merchant when you use a credit card, and there is a padding, so there's a calculation done against the airlines, and for example, MasterCard knows how many transactions a month an airline is processing, and there is a holdback of funds to the airline to cover for any potential default. So we are protecting the cardholders from a default of an airline, and a virtual account number was created from a real account number, so all the benefits and protection of the real account number transfer to any virtual account number for the purchase of a ticket.
Yeah. So in summary, payment by cash, there's exposure potentially to the agency. Mm-hmm. Payment by MasterCard or virtual card, you have a method for getting your money back in the event of
protecting the customer, the cardholder. Yes.
Okay, thanks, guys. This is a question from Georges Noval, and Georges, I hope I have pronounced your name correctly. I think this is quite good. So it says, why we may all agree that the advantage of virtual cards or accounts. Being retailers, we actually strongly depend on suppliers to also adopt the system first. There's no point in using the technology without having someone to collaborate with or indeed to pay. So is there some kind of report that lists all of these suppliers at their end, whether they're actually if they have the capability or indeed the enthusiasm for virtual cards?
I take
Jason?
that. Can I take that?
Yes,
Luis.
Luis,
Okay.
yes.
Absolutely no need to ask for any specific details. Any merchant that accept, for example, MasterCard, will be able to process, or is able today to process a virtual account number. It's no different, and there's no way for the merchant to know that this 16-digit account number with an expiration date and the 3-digit security code is anything but a valid account number. So that is the beauty of the concept, that a virtual account number is a valid MasterCard account number to apply to process through the existing rail and infrastructure of any merchant, either integrated with a GDS or a point of sale to the lower common denominator, punching the information in a point of sale terminal, just like they will do if you provide the credit information over the phone when you are guaranteeing a reservation and then you don't show, they charge you the first night at the hotel. Absolutely the same way that you process a regular card not present transaction. The fact that it's a virtual account number is irrelevant to the merchant.
Right, and I think the fact that people are asking these types of questions and there is a relatively simple answer shows that there is a lot of learning around this particular. Yeah, Jason, you would obviously agree on that.
Yeah, I concur on that, and as I said, I think before, Kevin, we typically our solution has been adopted by larger companies, typically online companies. First and foremost, but as we see virtual card technologies evolve in the travel industry, then we expect greater adoption by the mass market. And you're absolutely right. Sort of a greater deal of education is required around what these are and how they can be used.
Okay, we've had a number of questions around this same topic. Another one from George Chengzu and 3 or 4 others. They're all asking around the cost. So Cheng says, what is the value of using a virtual card over normal credit cards? Both seem identical, so that's, I guess, around the cost of it. And George once again says, current merchant costs for us are approximately 1.15% for credit cards, 2.3% for charge cards and individual payments. Would virtual payments have similar costs, higher or lower?
Jason, you want to take that, or? I'll take the first part. So virtual cards versus credit cards. So as we explained, the beauty of the virtual card technology is you're creating a single 16-digit MasterCard account number for every single booking or transaction that you're making. So if in an agency environment you take the scenario where you have a low-cost carrier that your agency is paying for on their own company credit card, come the end of the month, someone typically in accounts payable and finance has the job of taking the 3,000, 4,000, whatever it is, low-cost carrier bookings from the credit card statement and reconciling them with the agency's booking record. If instead a virtual card platform was used in place of the corporate credit card to make those low-cost carrier bookings, because you're generating a single-use card number for every single booking, what essentially you're doing is reconciling those payments with those bookings on the fly and as you go. And I think Luis picked up on the point of partial refunds as well. It goes beyond the simple transaction in that you can capture all of the activity against a single booking with the same payment token being the virtual card as well.
I would like to elaborate to answer that question because it's very important, that part of the education and understanding how this works. Okay, there are two types of virtual account numbers. The format is the same, the technology is the same, the acceptance is the same, depending on how the real account number these virtual account numbers belong to. There are two types of accounts. Either it is an account that was pre-funded, and the model is usually a B2B model where you have a retailer, for example, a TMC, a travel agency that is buying a hotel that is a negotiated net rate, for example, where actually the travel agency acts as a merchant and accept the form of payment from the traveler or the consumer or the person that is paying for the trip for the selling price, and needs to settle with the supplier for the net. And they turn around and generates a virtual account number to pay for the net, and that account number is pre-funded by that travel agency. The form of payment could have been a credit card, any credit card, not necessarily MasterCard, and it was processed by the travel agency as a merchant for the selling price, the transaction fees, everything, and then using individual virtual account numbers from MasterCard for the net payment, and that account being pre-funded by the travel agency. Some of the online travel agencies are using that methodology. They process the credit cards or the form of payment from the consumers that are buying through their online store for the selling price, and they need to pay. They generate individual virtual accounts just for the reconciliation and all the, instead of giving them just an account number from a central account, a ghost card, for example. So these are individuals, if you wish, ghost cards, each one for each particular transaction with all the controls to make sure that it's a single use, there is a maximum amount, there is a validity and expiration that is short term instead of the validity and expiration of the real account number behind it. The other model for corporate travel, where you have a central account, CTA, central travel account, that is the form of payment that the corporation is using or is giving that lodged account number or ghost account to the travel agency to issue all tickets against that. And instead of using that account number for the reconciliation issues and the challenges with refunds and anything else, then every time a ticket is issued, a hotel is booked, then a virtual individual account number is issued that is a daughter of, or it belongs to, or rolls up to the central account where the cardholder is the corporate client. In that case, the TMC eliminates any accounts receivables and enables payments for type of payments that normally you cannot or should not do on a central account. As you know, some of the hotels and most of the websites require, if you're going to buy something outside of the GDS, that you give them the 3-digit security code. For PCI compliance, travel agents are not allowed to hold that information in the traveler profiles, so you should not have that number anywhere. But because the virtual account numbers are generated one at a time for single use with a lot of limitations, and with that number, you're not exposing the real account number for fraud protection, and you have the ability to have the 16 digits, the expiration, and the security code given to you so you can make that purchase without exposing the real account number.
Okay, and we're very conscious of the time now, coming right up to the hour. So, Gene, I understand you wanted to throw this one in at the end before we finish up for the session.
Sure, Jason and Luis, we did not want you to get away without at least having a top-level comment on the white-hot topic about mobile travel services. Now we know that consumers are making a move towards using their smartphones and tablets to do more and more in the moment or impulse or in destination buying, shopping and buying. And I realize that there are significant system issues still to go in the travel industry to get virtual cards and other electronic payment forms in place. But can you give a little insight, even though it's farther down on the results of the survey, from each of your perspectives about how quickly we may be seeing consumer and business travelers connecting with virtual card payments more and more in travel in the near future?
I think that, this is Luis. the future is here. At MasterCard, we already have the ability for third-party technology integrators to deliver via a mobile device a virtual account number. Today for consumers, the technology is there with the ability to apply controls to it for corporate users, where you will have an electronic wallet, no different than the ones that you can have today for Starbucks, for example, to go and pay for your drinks, and the ability to generate a virtual account number with an image of the car, maybe a QR code or a barcode that can be scanned, and that you can use, for example, to pay for ancillary services, that emergency exit or the extra leg room at the airport when you're checking in the kiosk, and be able to generate a card to pay for that. So the technology is available. The point of sale may be a challenge until the terminals are all able to take this, for example, having a QR reader on a kiosk for an airline to be able to take that form of payment from your iPhone. You can check in today without a boarding pass by showing the screen to the agent, and they scan it at the gate. The technology is there. It's just for the payment solution. The technology is here. It's just the ability of all the point of sale to be able to accept it.
Jason, is there anything on the mobile element of all this you want to add, sir?
Yeah, and the rise of mobile was in sort of the six key trends. Just talking back to the Focusrite research that we sponsored, and specifically in the C2B space, so the consumer to business space, where we're eNett are focusing more in the B2B space. I expect adoption to be much slower. Given these are enterprise systems where we're looking to integrate some of our technologies, but you look at the results around the things that are keeping travel retailers awake at night, and how to support mobile payment options came forth out of a long list. So it's definitely up there and on travel retailers' minds.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you very much, everybody. Just a reminder, we've had a couple of quick questions come in at the end here, specifically from Sean Lee and Paul Williams. Paul and Sean, don't worry, we'll get those questions forwarded to the guys here, and indeed we'll make sure that we follow up with some of those specific questions when we repeat this on Thursday. So Paul and Sean, please don't worry, we're not snubbing your questions. We will get to those, I can assure you. So it just goes for me to say thank you very much to our panel. So that's Jason and Luis. Jason, who's in Dubai at the ATM exhibition, as I said earlier. Lewis, who is burning the candles in Connecticut, indeed just down the road from Jean in Connecticut in the small hours of this morning. So what will happen is, because we specifically we've produced two of these because we know that the interest is very large across the world, but what we wanted to do was target one for APAC and one for North America and Europe. So we are repeating this again with some slight differences, regional differences, again on Thursday. That's this Thursday, and that's 3 p.m. I incorrectly said 4 p.m. earlier on the messaging system. That's 3 p.m. UK time, which is 10 a.m. Eastern US. That's 4 p.m. Central Europe. So if you want to listen in again, or if you want to suggest to colleagues that are based over in the Western Hemisphere that they want to listen in, please do so by encouraging them to sign up during from the links on tnooz.com. So thank you very much once again to Jason and Lewis. Thank you ever so much to eNett for supporting this, and indeed for Thursday's one. The recording, as I said, will be put on Friday on tnooz.com of both of these sessions. Thanks obviously to MasterCard for contributing as well, and most of all, thanks ever so much for everybody for listening in and submitting your questions. Sorry those that we didn't get a chance to answer, but thanks. Enjoy the rest of your day. We've still got a full day ahead of us here in Europe and America, but thanks ever so much for listening, and we'll speak to you all very soon.
For your